Good morning. I'm never sure how to begin something like this. Never sure how to build it up, to let people know that I'm a missionary in Thailand without it sounding like some big announcement. And yet, I'm a missionary in Thailand. My family and I have been there for 6 years, and I want to tell you a little bit about what we do there. Now, this is not what I started out to do. My bachelor's degree is in psychology, and I spent the first 15 years of my career working in corrections in Oregon and Washington. Then, I pastored for 12 years in Washington and Idaho and got my Master of Divinity. My wife was content working in healthcare in Washington. Our 2 youngest sons were happily enrolled in school and looking forward to a normal American childhood. We were content right here in the United States. But it seems God had other plans. And it was not quite 10 years ago that my wife and I and our family decided that we were all being called to Thailand. That's where our 2 youngest sons finished school. This is really our 3rd career. Our work has changed in the time that we've been there, along with where we are living. We began in the northeast part of Thailand in Isan, but after a year, we moved to the north to Chiang Mai, and it's here that most of our ministry opportunities have taken place. We've tried to learn the language and the culture, and we do all right. We can hold a conversation in the market, and we're pretty good at ordering dinner and finding the bathroom. And we've mostly gotten used to the warmer climate. It's really cold here. It's been an adventure, and I have a ton of stories that I would be happy to share sometime. Now, there are essentially 2 rules for intercultural living, at least 2 that I want to mention here. The first is, nothing is certain until after it happens. Now, we learned this early on. Many times we have planned to do something only to have those plans change at the very last second when we are set to begin. We've planned a trip to a prison and driven 3 hours to get there, only to be told that we can't go in that day after all. We've planned for a classroom of 5th graders, only to arrive and realize that we're in charge of running an assembly. We've arrived at church, prepared to deliver special music, and found out that we're supposed to preach, or teach English, or do a prayer. Now, this leads directly into the second rule. Never assume you have any idea what is going on around you. This is key, because the culture in Southeast Asia is very different from the culture here in the United States. We've gone to what we thought was a weekend away visiting friends in their village, only to be taken to a whole different village for a 3-day church event where we were, again, the honored guests. Now, we've tried to be non-invasive. We want to introduce the Thai people to Christ, but we don't want to be disrespectful of what they believe. For example, many Thais believe that there's a spirit that lives in the threshold of the door, and that you're to step over the threshold so as not to offend the spirit. Now, even though we don't necessarily believe in that spirit, or maybe better, we believe in a more powerful Holy Spirit, we still step over that threshold. If we want them to listen to and respect what we believe, we have to listen to and respect what they believe. We try to find common ground. For example, Ecclesiastes. Both Solomon and Siddhartha struggled with exactly the same things. They only diverge in their conclusions. That's a great place to begin a conversation. Now, our main platform has been teaching English and doing that in various places. English teaching is really a nice foot in the door in any of the ASEAN countries. Several years ago, ASEAN was formed as an economic summit, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and they're trying to be what the European Union was supposed to be. And they have chosen English as their common language. And so I've taught English in several different elementary schools, the first of which was a very small village school in rural Thailand. We were likely the first foreigners ever to come to that particular school. From there, we moved to a different province and to a different school in that new province. Currently, we are teaching in a small but growing Christian school. This is a school fed almost entirely by local orphanages and children's homes, with most of the students having at least one parent in prison. It was begun by the same person who administers the foundation for prison ministry. Now, we've been there about 3 years. Andrea and I started out teaching 8th grade, then they added on kindergarten, and now 10th grade as well. And when we go back, they have asked us to continue to do that, but also help teach music as well. One of the activities that I enjoy most is teaching English at a local Buddhist temple and working alongside the teaching monk. This particular temple offers what they call monk chat. It's a time for people in the community, both locals and foreigners, to hear what Buddhists believe and ask questions and have a dialogue. It's a time for the monks to prepare and practice their English while they discuss Buddhism and other belief systems. And it was after one of these monk chats that I learned about the opportunity to teach. I've been helping out with most of that for the past year, pandemic notwithstanding, and I have asked if I would be interested in helping teach from this side of the world through video. I'm excited by this possibility, and we're looking to see how that would work out schedule-wise. We've had some fun classroom conversations. The monk uses Buddhism for conversation practice to help everyone talk about things that they're familiar with, but then he also offers me the opportunity to talk about Christian ideas. For example, one evening we talked about the difference between prayer and chanting and meditation. Another conversation involved comparing religions of no God, religions of one God, and religions of many gods. It was an opportunity for me to just share, not preach, not proselytize, share. We were 6 months in Thailand before I was able to make my first trip into a Thai prison. Now, again, I come from a background working in corrections, and so I was excited to be able to go in and help out in the prisons. I was asked to do special music with the PowerPoint behind me with my song translated into Thai. And I remember we'd been told when we went in to maintain a safe distance from the inmates. So I was back on the stage and I was playing, but I was using their sound system. And so my microphone was cutting out, the guitar wasn't working, and finally I got frustrated. I'd had enough. And I unplugged my guitar, and I waited around, and I wandered out into the crowd of inmates playing and singing and starting over the song. They were clapping along and rubbing my legs, and we just had a wonderful time. And that's been my mode ever since when I go into a new prison. I've been in a dozen different prisons in Thailand, men's facilities, women's facilities, and juvenile facilities. This actually led to a monthly role inside of a local Chiang Mai area prison. Generally, I go in and deliver a message with a translator, and I provide special music. And we'll coordinate ahead of time so that I'm talking about the same thing that the Thai pastor ends up talking about so that we're all on the same page. This prison houses roughly 2,000 people, and on a monthly basis, we'll see around 150 of those, maybe 120 men and 20 to 30 women, all come to this little gathering. Many of those had come to Christ and been baptized in prison, but they'd never had opportunity to have communion. And so the final time we went in before the pandemic hit, we were able to deliver communion to 150 Thai inmates. And that Christmas, we were able to take in Bibles as well. Since the pandemic took over the world, the team hasn't been able to go in, and all the prisons have been shut from outside contact, but hopefully they're going to be able to get back in soon. Now, for the past couple of years, We've also been working with a team that trains and equips church leaders to do their own outreach. The model of missions in the world is changing. For centuries, it was that the missionary would go from the foreign country and build the church and have people come and be a part of that. And that's not a bad model, but the world is changing because the problems associated with that model often outweigh the benefits. Churches in foreign countries end up looking like churches in America. Same music, same liturgy, same order. We want to bring in the idea that churches can be run and begun by the indigenous people. And so this institute, we go in and we help train church leaders to do their own outreach and their own ministries so that they're no longer dependent on foreign missionaries. For several years, this team trained English-speaking church leaders, mainly coming from Africa and South America. However, the travel restrictions with the worldwide pandemic made that impossible. And so, in order to keep busy, we began working to translate our training materials into Thai. Once we did that, we began holding seminars for Thai pastors and church leaders working in the greater Chiang Mai area. One of these seminars actually led to our latest ministry venture. It involves a man who uses coffee growing as outreach. He was my translator. We were enjoying a cup of coffee during break time, and I was remarking how wonderful the coffee was, and we started chatting. It turns out he had lived for about a year in Portland and had visited Seattle many times to learn about coffee, and then took ideas back with him when he went. In the 60s and 70s, the King of Thailand encouraged local Thai farmers to give up their very lucrative poppy growing fields and replace them with coffee and tea. Some of the best coffee in the world now comes from the hills around Chiang Mai and Chiang Rai. This man buys the coffee seed and puts together little starter plants and then donates them to the farmers in the hills. They grow the coffee, and then when they harvest it, they can either sell it to him or seek their own outside contracts. What he buys from them, he roasts and sells locally, or he ships raw to the United States. And with the money he makes off of that foundation, he supports his small church, his Bible school, his orphanage that houses about 100 kids, the foundation and all of the workings that go along with that, and he keeps current on coffee roasting and harvesting products. And he's hoping to build a school at his children's home. When the pandemic hit, Thailand went into full lockdown. Meetings of any kind were restricted, and so even though all of our team was within a 20-minute drive of one another, we met virtually. Our team leader at the time requested that Andrea and I begin to facilitate those meetings. And so every other week, we would organize and carry out a meeting with business, with prayer time, with worship. And when we were finally able to gather again, we were appointed as official church leaders, as team leaders, excuse me. As team leaders, we oversee several folks who are involved in various kinds of ministries. Some who work directly in ministry with Thai people, but most who work supporting people who are in work with Thai people. One of the families on our teams organizes and runs the schools that trains Thai leaders. Two of the families work in direct member care, caring for the missionaries who are working. One of them works with a counseling agency. Another goes out into the field as needed. We have one woman who works with homeschooled and third culture kid issues. And we have one family who works with I feel like we have accomplished a good bit in the amount of time that we have been in Thailand. We've helped out with 3 weekend English camps, taught in 6 different elementary schools, and visited 12 prisons in 7 provinces. We've guest taught in universities. We've been involved in mentoring local Chiang Mai Youth for Christ and church leaders, and been directly involved in 4 different churches. and we now lead an amazing team of professionals. I can say without hesitation that our time in Thailand has been life-changing. We would all say that without even pausing to think about it. Sharing Jesus in a different part of the world, geographically, culturally, and spiritually, is humbling. And partnering with people in the United States is humbling as well. We could not do what we do there without the prayer covering and financial support of people here. We could not teach English. We could not visit those in prison. We could not help out in orphanages. We could not lead our team without help from the American church. We're connected to a mission organization called Pioneers, and while we receive a monthly deposit from them, we are not paid by them. We are dependent on regular donations by people just like you and by churches just like the ones you go to. They donate to Pioneers on our behalf and pass those donations on to us. Some of it goes towards our monthly expenses, other goes towards incidentals and retirement and insurance. Our work in Thailand is a partnership. We partner with local Thai people there, and we partner with local Americans here. In Romans chapter 10, Paul poses a series of questions. He writes, "How then shall they call on him whom they have not believed? And how shall they believe in him of whom they have not heard? And how shall they hear without a preacher? And how shall they preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who preach the gospel of peace, who bring glad tidings of good things. Ours are the beautiful feet. You are the senders."